whatever feels comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, for the record, I'm Gene Franklin from Stanford University, having a conversation with Professor Lotfi Zadeh at the University of California at Berkeley. Lotfi, I was reading your biography, and I'd like, first of all, just a little bit of interest. I noticed that you got your first degree at the University of Tehran. What was your major there?
Well, my major was electrical engineering. Now, just one word about the University of Tehran, but before I say that, let me say, for the record, that I'm very proud to be able to say that Gene Franklin was a student in my course at Columbia University.
Well, thank you.
Yes, and also I wanted to mention for the record that he hasn't changed. He has discovered the secret of eternity. However, he has not revealed the secret, so I don't know what it is.
Well, I always tell my friends, you should see that portrait that's in my attic. But
let me add something to what you said earlier. Okay,
please,
fine.
Sure.
I just want to add that that I was born in the Soviet Union, but I was not a Soviet citizen. My father was a correspondent for the Iranian newspapers, so that I went through until the age of 10. I was living in the Soviet Union. My accent is a Russian accent.
Which province, Lotfi?
Baku.
Baku?
Which is now the capital of Azerbaijan. And then my parents returned to Iran, and they placed me in an American missionary school.
Oh, I see.
It was a Presbyterian missionary school, so...
Was the instruction in English, by chance?
Well, partly.
And partly Farsi?
Yes, partly. And so when I came to the United States then, I spoke English reasonably well, but it has to do with the fact that part of my education took place in the American missionary school. And I still maintain contacts with some of the people.
I see. And then when you came to the United States, did you come as a student at MIT? Was that the occasion of your...
Yes, so I entered the University of Tehran after receiving my degree from the American missionary school. And when I entered the University of Tehran, it was 3 years after it was established. So,
so it was very, yes, very new.
It was very new
institution.
Very new university, and but it was difficult to get into because it was patterned after French schools. All of our professors.
Was it an exclusively technical institution at that time?
Yes, that's right. No humanities.
No humanities. So your studies was all in engineering, mathematics.
Yes, that's right. But it was rather rigorous. It was demanding. As I said, it was patterned after French schools, École Polytechnique, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But so I received my degree, but I did not want to spend the rest of my life in Iran, although we had a good life in Iran, you know. But I was interested in science and things of this kind, and so I decided that come to the United States. And that was actually during wartime, because I came to the United States in 1944.
Oh, I see.
It was not so easy to get here.
Yeah. But so the radiation lab was at the height of its activity at MIT when you were there.
That's true. Well, they say I entered MIT, so I came to the United States as an immigrant, not as a student, because I wanted to spend the rest of my life in the United States. Not didn't come as a student, but my intention was to continue my education.
To continue education, yes.
So I entered MIT, and I guess they admitted me because they didn't have that many graduate students, because the University of Tehran had no track record whatsoever.
Yeah, of course, at that point.
For MIT for me was very easy because compared to the University of Tehran.
I was going to ask you that your preparation there was very well indeed in the technical subjects.
Yeah, because over there, it might sound a little bit strange, but it's still that way. In each course and the other course, you had a 2-hour oral examination.
Oh, I see.
2-hour oral examination.
I see. So,
that's really something.
So you had to be well prepared.
Yeah.
Well, now then, from MIT, then you went to Columbia, is that right?
Yeah, so what happened then is that I entered MIT and I got my master's degree, but I did not stay at MIT because although Gilman was urging me to stay at MIT because my parents came to the United States. And they settled in New York.
In New York.
And so I wanted to be close to them. I could have stayed at MIT, but I decided then to find something in New York, and then I found a job as an instructor at Columbia University.
Now, I never knew, Lotfi. Do you have siblings, by the way, or were you an only child?
No, I'm the only child.
Yeah.
But that thing, the fact that I somehow managed to get a job as an instructor at Columbia University changed my whole life. In the sense that I could have perhaps wound up at City College or Cooper Union or some such, but I hope I'm not offending anybody, but anyway. And but the fact that I was lucky enough to get that job at Columbia University opened many doors. And so I entered Columbia University in 1946 as an instructor. And in 1949, then I got my PhD degree. And it was during the late 40s and 50s that we had this bunch of people at Columbia University. It was headed by Professor Agazzini at that time.
And you did your thesis with...
Yes, he was my supervisor, but it was a nominal sort of supervision.
Yeah.
It was nominal supervision. He also supervised Coleman's thesis and some other people. Who was your supervisor?
Agazzini.
Agazzini, okay.
The parallels are more than that. John Russell offered me also an instructorship at Columbia. When I was at MIT, that's the reason I went to New York, was that I had the opportunity to be an instructor at Columbia.
Exactly.
And I didn't realize that we were following each other's footsteps as much as we did.
Yeah, so I guess both you and I were perhaps fortunate in that we found ourselves at the right place at the right time. It was early post-war period, and GI Bill of Rights, and students, industry, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And the Cold War, Cold War resulted in all kinds of defense industries sprouting around New York, and students in the evening working for gyroscope.
Now, your early research, I remember a famous paper in Time-Varying Networks. Was that associated with your graduate work, with your PhD?
Well, that was my PhD thesis.
That was your PhD thesis. Frequency analysis of time-varying networks. Okay. Right. And then you got involved, of course, with the sample data material with Agazzini.
That's right. So we had, I think, a very interesting bunch of people at Columbia University. Jim Franklin was one of the leading members of that group.
And then, when did you begin the idea of fuzzy sets and that line of work?
Well,
you've done early work in information theory and system theory generally.
That's right. But I've always been interested in logic, so that just to give you a piece of information, one of the very first work on application of multiple valued logic to transistor circuitry, that very first work was done by a student of mine, Oscar Lowenschutz, and that was 1953.
Oh, I see.
1953.
As early as that.
The first PhD thesis. And also about the same year, the first PhD thesis on coding with not two-valued coding, but n-valued coding using Galois theory and so forth, where the other was also done under my supervision. So I could see that.
I see.
And in 1950, paper, or article rather, that I wrote for, I guess, Columbia Institute, Berkeley, whatever. I did mention, that was thinking machines in new field in electrical engineering. And in that article, I mentioned that at some point, knowledge of multiple valued logic might be important. At that time, I said it was Laplace transform, Fourier transform, and so forth. But I said at some point we need that really. Mm-hmm. So I could see.
So as early as that,
yes,
there were
I could see it. Yes, I could see it.
Glimmerings of.
Yes, that's right. And then in 1956-57, when I was on leave, I spent it at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, which was logicians. Gödel was there, and so it was there then that I sat in on a course given by Stephen Kleene, who was world's leading logicians at Princeton. That's where I acquired more formal familiarity with logic. Yes, so that was 56, 57. so that it's not something that's sprang just like that.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
And when was the first paper with fuzzy in the title?
Well, my first mention of fuzzy thing was 1961 paper, which appeared in IRA proceedings called From Structure Theory to System Theory.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in that paper that I mentioned that we have all kinds of techniques for analyzing mechanistic systems.
Mm-hmm.
But these techniques somehow do not appear to work that well when we deal with, let's say, humanistic systems. There might be biological systems, economic systems, other kinds of systems. And I did say that what we need to deal with systems of that kind is mathematics of fuzzy quantities in the system, which we don't have.
And linguistic computing.
No, I didn't mention linguistic computing.
I see.
I didn't. But I said fuzzy mathematics. I did mention it.
Okay.
But at that point, when I wrote that paper, which was 1960, I guess, I did not have a very clear idea as to how to do that. So I could see the need.
Mm-hmm.
But it is in the course of writing this book, which Charlie Tesor,
yes,
1963 book on the new
System
system theory, that I began to see that the real problem is that we are trying to define concepts which are fuzzy using two-varied logic. We cannot do that. For example, when you try to define what you mean by an adaptive system or hierarchical system, that these are not really crisp concepts.
Now, Lotfi, I'd like to go back a little bit on your career now.
Sure.
It was in 1959 that you went to the University of California at Berkeley?
Yes, it was 1959. And
again, had John left Columbia at that time, or was that later? He went to NYU?
Yes, I don't remember exactly. It was either shortly before that or shortly after that.
It was just almost coincident, as I recall. But in any event, the Columbia supernova...
Yeah. Well, disintegrated, and the reason why it disintegrated, there wasn't just one reason, but one of the reasons was that the Department of Engineering at Columbia University developed some problems with electronics research laboratory at that time.
Yes. Which was the government-supported institution.
And these problems became very serious, and then they received some publicity. And at some point, then John Winnery, who at that time was chair of electrical engineering at Berkeley, he heard about that. And again, he was passing through New York, and he called me on Sunday. I remember these things distinctly. And he said, you know, I heard that there are all kinds of problems there. Would you like to come to Berkeley? And I thought a little about it, and eventually, okay, I'll come out, even though I was happy with my job. But the reason I mentioned that, because it's quite possible that if the phone were busy,
yeah.
or if I were not home,
you'd still be in New York.
I would still be in New York gathering moss. Yes. So sometimes your whole life depends on things of this kind.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then I had a good job at Columbia University. But it was a little bit of a challenge to move, to come to California. But I decided to do that. So in 1959, yes, and I think you left, you came to Stanford before that.
Yes, I came in 57.
57, yes.
Yeah.
So many of us, you moved to Stanford, and Julie moved to Berkeley, and Berkeley moved to Berkeley.
And Berkeley. Jack Bertram and Bertie Kalman went into
jobs with IBM and Reliance and so forth.
Yeah.
So either partly because of those problems, and partly because the people got their degrees and took jobs elsewhere. That whole thing.
Yeah. Just
disintegrated.
Yeah. Now I would like also to ask you a little bit about the academic sort of environment generally, and at Berkeley now. I know that at one time you had some strong views about the relation between electrical engineering and computer science. And I noticed in your biography that you are in the computer science side of the joint field at Berkeley. What was your thinking along those lines, and what are your views there now?
Well, you know that even though my training was not in computer science, and to this date I'm not much of a computer user because I hate to type. That's the reason, really. But I always was a strong believer in the importance of computation.
Yes.
In fact, when I was a student at MIT, I used to argue with Gilman about that because Gilman, who was, as perhaps some of you know and some not, he was really the epicenter of working on circuit theory and so forth. But so many people, including myself, were very strongly influenced by Gilman. And but he taught network theory, circuit theory, in an idealized network. So there was no noise, no nonlinearities, nothing. It was an idealized work. And so I used to argue with him. I said, look, I mean, of course I didn't use the word look, but, but I said, you know, as a student, of course, I said, I expressed the feeling that given the fact that noise, nonlinearities, various other things, that it will not be possible to employ these idealized techniques for circuit design, that at some point we'll have to use computers. And so at that time I could see already that is really the direction in which things are moving. So I came to Berkeley in 1959, and in 1963 then I was appointed as department chairman. I was not a candidate, but John Winner put his finger on me and said,
you will be. Now, at that time, it was not electrical engineering and computer science. Is that correct? At that time, it was the Department of Electrical Engineering. But
what happened is given that I was so strongly convinced that that's really the future, so the first thing that I did was to send a memo to members of the department saying, this is the direction that we should be pursuing.
I mean a joint...
No, sorry. Computers.
Into computers, okay. That the department should place more emphasis.
This should be our first priority, the development of a program in computer science. That was serious. But at the same time, somebody was brought from the University of Illinois to direct the computer center. And this particular gentleman had in mind something bigger than that. He wanted to set up a computer science department and centralize everything in that department. And of course, that clashed with my perception of how things should be done. So that resulted in a very serious conflict, And so that as department chairman then, I find myself in the midst of a battle between forces within engineering on one side and letters and science on the other side.
I was going to say, his activities were in the School of Letters and Sciences, were they not? So you had different schools as well as...
So he wanted to take away everything from electrical engineering and put in that department.
That had to do with computing.
So of course, it didn't sit too well with me. And so an idea occurred to me at some point. It was a preventive strike to request that the name of our department be changed.
I see.
I thought that if we do that, because there were already something in motion.
You wanted to make visible your interest that computer science.
Yeah, because he was in the process of preparing a proposal to set up this computer science. And given the fact that letters and science was much more influential than engineering, then his proposal would have been accepted, and then we would be left with nothing. But anyway, so I thought that to do that as a preemptive move, and I know distinctly that there was a party in Fort somewhere, and the idea occurred to me, and I broached it to a few people at the party, and they said yes. And then I called the dean and said, you know what, this idea occurred to me. He said, let's do it. Anyway, that was the beginning of still another phase of this conflict. And so to make the story short, then it took about 2 years, but eventually a compromise was arrived at under which we changed the name to Electrical Engineering Computer Science, which was our proposal. And they set up a computer science department in letters and science. That was the compromise.
I see. But does that structure continue to this day?
No. So what happened then is that department did not flourish.
I see.
Did not flourish. And in 1971, something like that. A visiting committee then, advisory committee to that department. Met at Berkeley, they looked at things, and they recommended the department be abolished.
I see.
So anyway, so what
Which
happened,
was accepted then eventually
so
by
the
the
administration then decided to take that department and move it into electrical engineering as a division of electrical engineering.
Oh,
In
I see.
1972,
I
the
see.
computer science department was absorbed.
So they were
Of course, people were not very happy about it.
stitched to the electrical engineering
That's right.
department.
And but then some of the people in electrical engineering then joined the computer science division. I was one of them. And others then stayed in electrical engineering. So from 1972 on then, we had this division.
We've had sort of electrical engineering division and a computer science.
No, just electrical engineering and the computer science division, which is the structure that we have now.
I see.
It's nice structure. And it has worked out very well. But let me just mention one thing, that when we were in the process of applying for a change in our name, Peter Elias, who at that time was chair of electrical engineering at MIT, was visiting Berkeley. And then I asked him, what do you think of this proposal? He said, like, it's no good. He was very, very negative about the idea of changing the name to electrical engineering. Well, to make the story short, 3 or 4 years later, MIT changed
their name
to electrical engineering, which is the name.
Yes.
So, of course, we know many things have happened since then. Most electrical engineering departments have changed their name, but not to EECS, but to electrical and computer engineering.
Yeah, EECE is a common.
So that we have a structure where there is computer science and there is electrical and computer engineering. That's more or less the situation. In many places, including Stanford, computer science was moved from lateral science into engineering.
That's right. And they remain separate departments at Stanford, but we have a joint laboratory.
That's right.
With a lot of exchange.
But my conviction has always been and remains that it's better to have a bigger unit rather than to have two separate.
Have the two separate.
That's right.
And the different thing. Now, how has the student enrollment evolved in that connection? I know at Stanford, we're finding that since the computer science department established an undergraduate major, that an increasing number of students are choosing that, and the number choosing electrical engineering in the standard way is reduced, but the total stays about the same. What has been the experience at Berkeley?
Well, experience at Berkeley has been quite similar. Now, of course, what happened is that we are in the midst of this boom. But boom, I mean the whatever name you want to attach to it, the internet boom, or this boom, or that boom. And so that boom is about 3 or 4 years old. That before this started happening, that started with World Wide Web, basically.
Yes.
World Wide Web. That enrollments in computer science were going down. But after that, things began to change. But since computer science division is a part of EECS, so at Berkeley, we see the same thing. But since we have no compartmentalization, that's significant, let's say. So it's relatively easy
to accommodate
that. So most of the hires now are computer science and so forth. And so at Stanford, I assume this problem is not quite as trivial as it is at Berkeley. I think that electrical engineering does have a problem at this point. Does have a problem in that regard. Because things are moving towards software, more and more, and hardware is, is becoming somewhat less
important.
There is a problem. There is a problem, and I made certain suggestions so far as our department is concerned, and my suggestion was to adopt as our banner information/intelligent systems. So that basically this is really what we are doing, that whatever we do can be put under that roof. That
is to say that this is your idea of sort of the future of electrical engineering and computer science.
That's right. In other words, to say that, well, here we have four things: conception, design, construction, utilization. And everything that's done in electrical engineering and CS, except for plasma physics, things of this kind, can be put under that.
Well, let me ask you this, Lotfi. Clearly, the computer revolution, if you please, including the network and everything else, has been driven by the revolution in the hardware. The fact that computation is getting cheaper and cheaper, faster and faster, storage is getting more and more massive. Who's going to design those things? I mean, that trend is not going to stop.
No,
we shouldn't stop it anyway.
No.
Is that right? So if we follow your path, then will we have no one left that
No, because remember,
is building better chips
four things,
and so on?
Four things.
Oh, I meant
Conception,
okay.
design, construction.
Okay.
And utilization.
So you're not...
No, definitely not. No, I'm merely saying that this is an important part, but it fits into those things.
Yeah.
So construction, people who are constructing things.
Building from materials to...
So the chip designers, that would fit into that sort of thing. But notice that that more and more people use these things, people who are, what's called users. And they don't care what's inside, just as people drive a car, they don't care what's under the hood. So that number is growing more rapidly than anything else. It's people who use things. But so I think that having this kind of a structure, but it would be unrealistic to change the name. So I said, well, let's not change the name, but let's sort of assume that this is the banner that we are marching on.
Sure.
Marching under.
Well, and as you know, the coin of the realm in the university is billets and appointments. And so the implication of what you're saying would have strong influence on where new appointments were made and what research was undertaken and so on.
That's right. Now, if I were department chairman at this point, I could push this through.
That's what you would do.
But just a member of the thing, I can make a suggestion, but if I were a member of the department back in 1963 and I suggest that we change the name, I wouldn't get the first base.
Probably wouldn't have happened. Yeah. Let's come back to the control. I don't think I said at the beginning that we were at the conference on decision and control in Tampa, Florida. How about the control field? As you know, our advisor, John Ragazzini, of course, was strong in the controls area. What is your picture of this discipline? Clearly, there are a lot of folks coming to this conference. So, on the superficial basis, all is well and healthy.
That's right. Well, I'm somewhat critical. And my criticism is not of recent vintage. I wrote something in I don't remember 59 or 61, which appeared as an automatic control. At that point. And so my criticism was directed at the fact that there was what I viewed as excessive preoccupation with proving theorems, So this has become the yardstick for respectability. You don't do things. You prove a theorem, more and more sophisticated, more and more this and that, and you get accolades and awards and promotions, and I'm exaggerating a little bit.
And papers published.
Papers published, and so look at transactional automatic control. I was critical of that, I said, look, we have robotics, we have this, we have that, all these things are neglected, and you're just, as I said, there was some exaggeration, of course. But anyway, so my perception is that there hasn't been sufficient recognition that there is much more to control, in some sense, today than there was in the past. We have economic control, biological control, we have traffic control, we have all kinds of control things. But the tendency within the control systems community has been to stick to set point-oriented control. Lyapunov stability theory and many other things are directed toward that primarily. And as in many other situations, I think that there are communities that become self-sufficient in some sense, and they fail to take into consideration the fact that the world is changing, that things are changing, that they should welcome certain things. And so that the control systems community has taken a very dim view of fuzzy control. And there are essentially no papers on fuzzy control and transactional automatic control. Because you have taken some interest in fuzzy control.
At some point.
But
our cameraman has. Yes.
Yes.
But
Diana Kramovich, yes.
Yes.
And so anyway, so the control systems community, and if you look at the program of this conference, it's a very good program, and I think it is perhaps more reflective of some of the things that are happening than previous programs where we see movement in that direction. But this should have been done, I think, a long time ago, so that there would be more things on neural control and computer vision and fuzzy control. Of course, I'm not an entirely objective,
sure, of course. We wouldn't expect any less.
That's right.
But so your sense is that there's been perhaps an unfortunate tendency to be overly narrow in the definition of what is controlled, as reflected by the acceptance of papers in the transactions and by the, as you say, the accolades, the recognition. Exactly. That is come from.
What I see is, I'm in the computer science division, but what I see is this: that in the computer field, there is a different mentality, and that is what people expect and what people respect is when people do something. For example, in our own division, people come up with some ideas. They start companies, they hint to me this, that, Berkeley Unix and risk and rate and so forth. So these are the things that lead to systems that have certain kind of an impact on information technology. I don't see that sort of in the control fields. I don't see that. I don't see accolades directed at people who come up with some ideas about control, who build some kind of system. I don't see that. And there should be much more of that sort of thing. So, I'm more of a theoretician myself.
Sure.
I'm not really a kind of a person who does it, but I feel it should be done.
Let me ask if you would consider this as a source, perhaps, of some of that, which is what I'm thinking of now is the tenure process in our universities. We have found, for example, that to give tenure to someone whose contribution has been to do something, to build something, to invent something, is almost impossible to do. Now, do you feel that, and yet someone who's a theoretician, as you say, who's proved lots of theorems, yet lots of papers published there, is easier to do. Is that a source of any of this difficulty, do you think?
Well, we have this problem within the computer science division. That is, we would have somebody who has come up with a system, that has a big impact, but there are no publications in referee journals and conference proceedings, yes, and we had a hard time. But eventually, we succeeded in sort of educating some of these committees.
I see.
Above the university, the departmental committees,
Sure.
Educating those people and say, look, we have to use different yardstick in this field. We cannot expect some publication, archival journal. We cannot do that. We have to use, and it was accepted.
So you do feel that the intellectual contribution of someone who developed something, I don't know, maybe some big software package or something like that, I don't know whether one could get tenure for PSpice or for Unix or something like that, but
we have actually today, we have quite a few theses which are of that kind, where people have done something.
Have actually done something
yes. But in some cases, it didn't happen that way. An example is Bill Joy, who is one of the most brilliant people in the computer business, developer of Berkeley Unix and so forth.
And John
that's right, he never got a PhD.
Oh, he never got a PhD?
Because, he couldn't,
yes,
given these things, he couldn't get a PhD degree. So I suggested at some point, not serious, but I said, let's give him a PhD degree without any exams, without this, without that. And
in recognition of what he's done.
A tremendously important thing. We take, for example, this fellow, Jim Gosling, who developed or invented Java.
Yeah.
He's not the kind of person who would write erudite papers on
Right.
proof theorems of this kind. He's a doer. He did something, okay?
Sure.
So we have to recognize that there are people like that. There exists a problem like that in the realm of writing, you know. Writing in the sense that there are people who are writers and so forth, but they could never get an academic appointment, and they're creative writers, or they might be creative musicians, you know, something like that.
But doesn't that change the definition of the academy?
Yeah.
And I take it that you would be in favor of broadening that that definition to accept some of these more performing arts, as it were, and sciences.
Well, that's the same sort of a thing happening in these other fields, you know, the struggle. Struggle, conflict, whatever you want to call it, between those who wanted to give certain respectability to people who are creative writers, let's say, but not reviewers of things done by other people, you know, and those who write those scholarly reviews of this work or that work, you know.
Okay, let's come back now. Your status, Lotfi, are you officially retired at
well, my status
University of
is
California?
this. My status now, there is a new title there. It's professor in graduate school, so that's my status.
I see.
Professor in graduate school. And so, although I am retired, officially, but my title is professor in graduate school. But there has not been a change in my situation since I retired.
So the future is like the past, then? What's next?
Next moving my
Zadeh,
residence underground. That's next. And most of my contemporaries have moved their residence here. So what I want to say is this: that I did retire in 1991. But since then, I've continued to do the same thing. That is, I continue to teach courses every 20 years.
I see.
The only thing that I don't do now, at this point, is supervise PhDs, and I don't do that because I don't think it would be fair for somebody to become a student and then all of a sudden find himself or herself an orphan. But I do work with postdocs.
I see.
And also we have a program, it's an initiative, Berkeley Initiative of Computing.
Yes, I saw that in your biography.
So I think that my strength has been related to just making suggestions.
Yeah.
Let's do this. I always make suggestions.
Sure.
Let's do this, let's do that. And I'm making suggestions both in my own field, that is in physiologic, and let's do this, let's do that. But also outside of that, in terms of new programs, new things. Some of my suggestions are accepted, some of my suggestions are not accepted. I accept that.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to a lot of your suggestions in the future, Lotfi.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure talking with you today.
I feel like fish in water at CDC. Yes.
In the water or out of the water?
In water.
In the water.
Okay.
Thank you, Lotfi.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Charming lady.
So we'll have to.
I wonder I behave like Benton.